Here we are, location Luxe. I'm your host, Alan Canis, and here in season 1, we'll be focused on what we're calling the Great Lifestyle Migration. On each episode, I'll be right here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. Over the last few decades, we've witnessed a great migration for employment and technology development. As such, the need and demand for homes has been among the highest in the country. These migration choices are giving people an extraordinary opportunity to explore new locations, amenities, and lifestyle options. And that's why we're here. Location Luxe. This week, we are going south of the border, where we are meeting my friend, Nick Fong, who is a top real estate agent in guess where? Baja, Mexico. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Alan, it's my pleasure. Why aren't you down here in Cabo with me?
You must tell us a little bit about you, who you are, your business, and where are you right now?
Literally, I'm sitting in the house of one of my clients in a gated community called Pedregal. It's located on the Pacific Ocean, and Cabo San Lucas is privileged because we're at the tip of the Baja Peninsula. And for those of you that don't know, it's 1,000 miles south of San Diego, the Mexico-US border. And about me, I'm originally from Chicago. I have real estate, kind of a background. I studied real estate finance at the University of Illinois. Long story short, 20 years ago, I came on vacation. I met my wife, Rocio here, and fast forward a couple years of dating, we got married, and I've been here almost 17 years now.
Wow, 17 years. That's a long time. So Nick, tell us a little bit about the healthy lifestyle that you have there and that people can enjoy.
The weather here, for example, Alan, is all sunshine all year round. We probably have 330 days of sunshine a year. And so we actually welcome when it's cloudy. We welcome when it's raining. And as a result of that great weather, we have a lot of outdoor activities. And so when you're in a house like this one, Casa Vista Alegria, you're drawn to the outdoor areas. And so from a livability standpoint, things like going out on your mountain bike, going for a hike in the mountains, going in a boat, going deep sea fishing. I don't know if you knew this, Alan, but the largest bill fishing tournament in the world is held here in Cabo San Lucas every year in October. And so that's just an example of the lifestyle that you get here. And also, because we're really built around tourism, people are coming here to enjoy life, to have a good time, to go on vacation. And so we have resorts, we have amenities, we have restaurants that is really geared around having and getting the most out of life. And so when you talk about lifestyle, you really can't do much better than here in the Baja.
It sounds like it. That is a lead into, let's talk about your seasonal activities that go on in the Baja.
Yeah, so seasonally speaking, we typically look at it from two standpoints, our high season and low season. When it's cold back up in the States or in Canada, where most of our clients come from, that's our high season. And then our low season, is the summer months. So when it's nicer weather back up in the States or Canada. But the area of Cabo, the Baja Sur, is really an all year round destination. So in terms of seasonality, there's always people here, there's always activities to be had. As I mentioned earlier, there's the largest billfish tournament, the Bisbee, held in October. That really is the start of a lot of activities for us. Sammy Hagar's famous Cabo Wabo restaurant and bar is down here, and his birthday is, interestingly enough, also in October. And so that gets going. Our holidays, American and Mexican holidays, are real popular. So when we talk about the seasonality of our locations here in the Baja, whether it's Cabo San Lucas or the capital of our state, La Paz, and everything else in between, Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, spring break, can't forget about spring break. Those tend to be the times of the season that we're most trafficked in the Baja.
My daughter's birthday is in October, so I think we have to make a Hagar trip down there. I think that would be a good excuse.
Alan, yes, or sooner. You can come down sooner.
So how easy is it to access flights and to be able to get in and out of Baja?
You know, that's one of the things that the Mexico tourism, the resorts have done very well. They have made it very easy for the foreign traveler. It's weird to talk about myself as a foreigner, American, but we're foreigners as Americans in the Baja, Cabo, in Mexico. And we have direct flights, dozens of direct flights from the States every single day, and common areas of hubs that fly in directly: Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, where I'm from, Seattle, Vancouver. So there are a lot of airports in the States, New York, that fly direct into here at Cabo.
Nick, can you please tell us about the tax structures, the tax savings that people can have when going to Baja?
Wow. So this is where you're going to flip, Alan. So where I'm coming from in Chicago, Cook County, right, where you could pay over 2% of your property value in annual real estate taxes. Take a guess, Alan. What, as a percentage of the property value, we pay in annual real estate taxes?
I'm going to say you pay a flat fee.
A flat fee. Okay. So it's not a flat fee. It is a percentage of the property value, but it's 0.1% of the property value. So that $1 million home we sell to our client, they're paying on average $1,000 a year in annual property taxes.
Wow. And income tax?
Yeah. So I took your breath away with the low real estate taxes. In terms of income taxes, the income taxes for most employees, the employers pay the taxes for their employees so that they don't file taxes. But if you're a business owner or if you're a sole proprietor, the tax rate is on average about 35% of your wage earnings is what you pay in taxes.
So we just bought a second home in Tahoe. We should have bought it in Baja.
Well, yeah, I mean, the good thing is, like, the income taxes on income earned in Mexico if you're working here is not much different than if you were back in the States. But most of our clients aren't working here. They are retired or they're continuing running their businesses or their work back in the States or Canada.
Gotcha. Nick, could you please tell us a little bit about your culture? I'm going to put this into a two-part question. First is regarding your schools, and what's going on with the schools there, because you do have younger families that are moving into the area and relocating, and people don't think about that when they think of Baja.
No, Alan, I certainly didn't think about that when I first came to the Baja and moved here as a single person, now married with kids. It's a topic that not only myself, but many of our clients are asking us. And so fortunately, the area has many school options. Private schools, bilingual, both in English and in Spanish. So what's amazing is the kids in the Cabo area, up and along the Baja, in these private schools, they're learning English and Spanish.
Wow, that's good to know. And the second part of the culture question is your restaurants and your downtown and the other types of activities that you have going on in Baja.
Yeah, you know, Baja is the whole state, right? Baja Sur, and I'm located in Cabo San Lucas. Cabo San Lucas is the epicenter of tourism. It's the destination with the arch. The restaurants and the activities, the culture, we have a huge cultural center right on the marina of Cabo San Lucas. Restaurants up and along the marina. There's nightlife, bars, a lot of fun activities. Because it's around the marina, there's the fishing boats, the sunset tours. You can go scuba diving, snorkeling off of the marina, and it connects to our most famous beach, Medano Beach, which is where the majority of our hotel and resorts sit also.
It really makes me want to come there right now for a visit. I'm ready. Please tell everyone about the areas you represent. Is it just Baja?
Yeah, so the areas that we represent is all along Baja Sur, so the southern Baja. And so where I'm located right now in Cabo San Lucas, at the tip of the peninsula, the southern tip, we go geographically about 7 hours driving or 400 miles north to Loreto. And then on the other side of the peninsula, on the Pacific side, which is just over my shoulder, we'll go up another few hours by car. And so our geo farm is such that we probably cover several hundreds of square miles. And we can only do that because we have several offices located throughout the state.
And Nick, please share with us what you're seeing in the housing market. Are you seeing multiple offers, new developments? What are you seeing in the housing market today?
All the above. I literally was on a coaching call with one of my agents this morning where she's working with 2 clients wanting to make offers on the same property today. And so it's not like what it is in the States in the current market where every property is getting multiple offers and overbidding on the list price. But it's important for you, Alan, and the viewers to understand that we do mimic the US real estate markets. And in my experience being down here, we're delayed by 6 to 12 months. And so what you were seeing a year ago, we're just starting to see now. And it's, so it's interesting because if you've ever seen that movie Back to the Future, Back to the Future 2, it's literally I have a DeLorean and I can go back into the past and have the playbook as to what's going to happen here. And so a lot of new development, prices are on the upswing. We are running out of inventory. I was just on another call this morning with another one of my agents, and he said multiple buyer clients, he just can't find the inventory to satisfy what they're looking for.
And what conditions can a buyer expect to find? Are they renovated as is? What are they expecting when they come to Baja?
Most of it, Alan, is newer construction, less than 10 years old, or even pre-construction. But there are some cases, like the house I'm currently in, that's a 20-year-old or more home that, in fact, we just got this house under contract. And the way we got it under contract is we did renderings and we were able to show the consumer what it could be. Basically a house in the 2020s, right? Not in the 1990s. And so the far majority though of our inventory is less than 10 years old. And a lot of that is pre-construction.
Nick, could you please explain to us what we could see as far as price points?
Yeah, so the good thing is, in terms of price points, we cater to the $50,000 lot buyer or the $150,000 condo buyer upwards of a $20 million oceanfront home. And so the majority, though, Alan, of our buyers are in and around the $500,000 price point. The average right now of houses that have gone under contract or closed in this year have been just under $1 million. That's our average house sale. And our average condo sale is over $600,000. But don't let that scare the viewers that are saying, well, I have a $300,000 budget, because we deal a lot with those type of buyers and that only want to spend a few $100,000, whether it's a house or condo with an ocean view.
I think $600,000 is well within my budget.
Okay. So we'll see you in October for your daughter's birthday.
Nick, could you please tell us a little bit about the secondary home market, the VRBOs, the Airbnbs? How is that? And then I understand that you also have a play in that as well.
Yeah, not unlike what's going on in the rest of the world. The vacation rental by owner, whether it's an Airbnb or a VRBO platform, it is super popular. I would say 50% of our buyers right now in the market are looking to buy something when they're not using it themselves. They're able to rent it on a vacation basis. And so the market is extremely hot for that kind of property, whether it's a house or a condo. And it is really fueling the growth of the area. When I was mentioning a lot of new construction projects, a lot of that is to address that demand in the market.
Nick, can you talk a little bit about what a buyer can find in appreciation over year after year?
So what we have seen in our market, fortunately, in the last few years, appreciation probably in the double-digit percentages, over 10%. Historically, from what I've seen, is somewhere between 3 to 5% appreciation in the time that I've been here. But not unlike in the States, where appreciation is incredible, the same thing is happening here in the Baja, Cabo San Lucas, and surrounding areas. And just going back to what I was mentioning earlier, we mimic the US real estate market. So if you were ever wondering what's happening down here in the Baja, just look in your backyard. And if it's not happening down here yet, it will in the next 12 months.
I'm expecting in the next 12 months for you to hit 28% appreciation, because that's what we hit first quarter. 2021.
Oh my gosh. Well, my buyers this quarter are going to be super happy with that, for sure.
Nick, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Location Luxe.
Thanks, Alan. And I'm going to hold you to it. See you in Cabo soon.
I will be there. You can count on it.
All right. Bye for now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Goods, Elevating Outdoor Entertaining, presented by Fire Magic. My name is Lisa Bingham Dewart, and I'm Luxe's Southern California, Pacific Northwest, and LA Homes editor. Today, I'm thrilled to be here chatting about alfresco cooking and entertaining with Boston-based chef and Emmy Award-winning TV personality and lifestyle host, Anna Rossi, who recently installed her very own tricked-out outdoor kitchen. But first, a big thanks to our friends at Fire Magic. So Anna, just in time for summer and a return to real life, you now have this amazing outdoor entertaining space. So can you talk to me a little bit about what your primary considerations were as you went about making this amazing area for yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, welcome to my kitchen. It's so exciting to have you here. I wish we were here in real life, but this is the next best thing. I think for me, just like indoors, outdoors, kitchen and the food story becomes the heartbeat of the entertaining experience. It's a place where people just want to gravitate. And so my primary objective was to create a place that people didn't want to leave and felt welcomed the moment they caught sight of it. And also, as an entertainer, a place that could really give me the playground to entertain and host with ease. So this is the manifestation of a long wish list that has completely over exceeded what I could have dreamt of.
So you kind of hit on it a little bit, but I would love to hear just sort of what your primary considerations were when you were setting up this space in terms of space planning and how you set things up.
Sure. Yeah. So our property itself has like different zones. Like I have like, we have like the pool and the yard where the kids can run around and a cozy living space around an outdoor fire. And then for the kitchen space, the kitchen itself has zones also. So like, I think of it in terms of working our way through the evening. What you see here is like the cocktail zone where I have my refrigeration, my outdoor rated Fire Magic refrigerator and ice machine. I have a really clean, minimal work surface. So this is the area where I can set up sort of the theme for the evening, the tempo. I love signature cocktails. So that's what you'll find there. And then as you sort of move into the gathering or the soiree, I have the grill where you can really deliver some incredible food, whatever you could dream up for the day part or for the menu is what happens here. I have warming drawers. So if I've done prep in advance in the cooler temperature seasons, maybe where I'd have my porcelain plates warming for an outdoor meal, casseroles, pulled pork, whatever. And then the side burner, and I chose to put that on the end. So my big paella pots and pans could just spill over the edge and I wouldn't be limited. And they're also heavy. So I wanted something below counter depths, but it's sort of a progression through a really great evening in the layout itself. And it's also suitable to like how I like to move. Maybe people want to stay, I want to keep them on that side of the counter. Maybe I want to have them come in and have them like peer in under the hood. So it can kind of work to who you're hosting and how you like to entertain.
After living through the last year, did that in any way shape your idea for how you wanted this to be set up? Did you kind of go a little bit bigger, just knowing that outdoor entertaining was such a much bigger priority? How did that all shake out for you?
Yeah, I mean, this last year really changes the person on a lot of levels. I think that like this was always my vision and my dream, but what I learned this last year, we still stayed social with our close group of friends, but stayed like 100% outside, even in snowsuits. And so like, how do you create a space, even in New England, even, where we really have these true 4 seasons, where it can be highly functional and a desirable place to be in? And I think the takeaway for me this last year is like when you are entertaining outside, the memories that you create in that evening or that day just are so much more saturated. I feel like being a part of the seasonality, and there's this beautiful synthesis that I feel, especially as a chef, and I love to garden, and that we're like I'm a part of what's in bloom, and being, I love to think that I cook in the seasons, or, that's inspiring my menu, but to actually have the seasons here and to be able to pull it in interactively to the cooking experience just leaves our friends with this incredible taste in their mouth. That is what is my hope as somebody who just loves to share my love of food.
It must be something about the sensory. You're really engaging all of your senses in a way that maybe just being inside doesn't, because you've got so much more sensory input from being outdoors. So in terms of putting together your kitchen, what were some of your top cooking, cooling, and storage solutions? What were your sort of on your must-have, can't live without list?
Yeah, so my love story with Fire Magic started with the grill. We started out with a freestanding Echelon 1060 grill that lived on our pool deck. And then in that experience of grilling on it, we realized, wow, this is a product that you could build an entire kitchen around, in terms of being able to bake, being able to cook, not just grill, the rotisserie and all the fun that you could have. So as we started to expand our thinking, well, what does the ultimate dream kitchen have that we think of indoors? It has cooling and refrigeration. So we have the outdoor rated refrigerator, the ice machine for those blended cocktails, or just being able to put your raw bar on ice and have that accessible right there. Also running water. We easily installed a filter system underneath our sink, so you can have not only that easy deposit for your dishes, but also a great source for like filling up the pitchers. And then beyond the grill, having those luxuries that just make it so much more seamless, like the paper towel holder, the place to put your trash and your recycle, the warming drawer, and so much storage. Because with entertaining big groups of people, and also having a grill, let alone a side burner that can handle just so much volume, you're going to have a lot of really big pieces of equipment and accessories. And that's another thing that I just love about Fire Magic, is like the vault of accessories, from like pizza stone to griddle to their rotisserie motor to smoker charcoal boxes. Like, not having to store that in my laundry room, but to have that just so accessible right here. And part of this story is just such a luxury. Watching the home edit, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta label these things.
And so when you're outside, you basically have no reason to run inside. If you have everything kind of just set up and ready to go, you are 100% in your space then.
It's amazing. I mean, yeah, from having like that little drawer to keep your cocktail napkins and your grill tools and your citronella candles, to having a place to quickly wash your hands, and also power, right? So we're strategic in where we put counter power outlets for, like if we were doing something that requires a blender, or those little add-ons, depending on, what you're up to for the evening.
You could plug in your mixer out there, huh?
Yeah. And it's actually, that's one thing that I really love about I did a leathered leathered granite countertop surface. It is so fun rolling out my pizza dough or pie crust. I mean, and again, like that connection to the season, depending on the temperature and the humidity, I just love it. I mean, if you want predictable, stay inside maybe, but there's a lot of play that you can have that just makes you feel so much more connected to the cooking experience.
Now that actually brings me to my next question about the materials and the furnishings that you opted for your space. What were some of your favorite choices? It sounds like that leathered finish was really something that you love a lot. But why choose that? What was the appeal before you kind of started working on it?
Yeah, well, we started looking at our appliances first. So we knew what we wanted from the Fire Magic portfolio, starting with the grill, which is, I think, such a showpiece. And you have that beautiful 304 gauge stainless steel that already has this magnificent luster, and I think just it's like jewelry in the kitchen space. And then building around the appliances, and then having, pulling in stone and durable material. We have existing stone walls on our property. So I went with a uh, New England blend veneer stone finish on the outside of our space, and then bluestone for the interior of the kitchen. And then I love that luster that you get from the leathered finish of a black granite. So nothing too shiny, something that has like a demure quality that plays really nicely, I think, with the stainless, and that just speaks beautifully to it. And then, like we were talking about with fashion or interior design, the fun of mixing metals. I had just joy in picking out the lightings that can just like show off the space as we get into the evening hours. So we went with brass under counter lighting to help actually with like what we're doing, but also to just give all the guests that little glow. And then the hardscape itself is a Unilock Easy Clean product that's like a umbrella. So with kids and mustard and ketchup, and if the grease tray spills a little bit, or let alone like foliage season, it's not going to stain. And all of this is like, you have the stone that's meant to last a lifetime. And it, that's another reason why we felt so confident making the investment with Fire Magic, right? Because it's been around for over 80 years. They have lifetime warranty, and it's just deciding to create an outdoor kitchen is a huge investment. I mean, even just looking at the hard surfaces, right? You're bringing in the natural stone veneer and beautiful granite countertops, and doing the electrical and the plumbing. So when you're making that level of investment, you want the appliances that you are setting into stone, literally, to be able to also last a lifetime. And having grilled on a Fire Magic for years before we expanded what our kitchen story was with them, it gave us so much confidence knowing that they were the perfect partner for a project like this.
And so in terms of your furnishings, we can see a little bit of your chairs and things like that. So what was sort of your vision for how you were going to furnish the space and have people be comfortable in it?
We love teak. We love natural materials, materials that we don't have to worry about, that can just wear that beautiful patina that you get with seasons so well. And we have little kids. We have a 6 and 7-year-old. So my attitude is the only thing precious in the house should be the kids.
Which makes a whole lot of sense. So, and then what are some of those little things? You mentioned the lighting, and I wanted to dig back into that a little bit about, because if you are using this space, year round, sometimes there are shorter days. How are you making this kind of more suitable for more of the year?
Yeah, well, we worked with Brian Scanlon of Scanlon Design for the kitchen layout. And our original kitchen was going to be much further away from the house. And in conversation with him, we realized, well, we'll get so much more use out of it in New England, especially keeping it close to the house. So this is an easy, like, snow shovel distance inside, as well as benefiting from like the extra storage and refrigeration of the indoor kitchen. It's just a flow where you're pulled out here. And the menu changes. Like, we may not be grilling hot dogs and hamburgers in November, December, and January, but we love doing our Thanksgiving turkey on the rotisserie. The rotisserie handles 75 pounds of whatever you could wish to put on there. And so that's become a tradition. You also have the side burner that is like the ultimate, if you want like the fried turkey, or we do Feast of the Seven Fishes at Christmas, so the clam bake goes on there. And then a new tradition that we have with our group of friends, thanks to this last year, has been like somewhat very competitive curling tournaments with whiskey and kielbasa that pair very well with the season. So I think it's just a lot of fun, like getting out of that mindset. Oh, I have to do like chicken drumsticks and hot dogs on the grill, and realizing if you love to cook and entertain, like having an appliance like this just lets you be outside and create whatever you want in the way that you want to do it.
I'm so excited because we get to see some of these pieces in action and see some of the things that you create. So we're going to be asking you to put on your chef hat and show us this special menu that you've created for us today. So I'm very excited about that.
Sure. Are you ready for a cocktail, Lisa?
I am, well, yes, I'm always ready for a cocktail. And the sneak peek I got of the menu, it sounds amazing.
Okay, well, let me take you over there.
So now we get to see Anna in action in her kitchen, making this amazing menu she has designed for us today. So first up is our signature cocktail, because what event wouldn't be complete without a signature cocktail?
Exactly. It makes even a Wednesday feel special, right? So this is a seasonal sangria. I love using the berries, the fruits that are ripe in the season. So I have some gorgeous peaches that I grilled on medium heat on direct flame to get these great grill marks. And it gives this like almost caramelized nuance to the stone fruit. They're so sweet. So you get this really beautiful char and almost like a candy like crust on the outside. And then these have been stewing in a little Amaro, which has this great rhubarb bitterness to it and a little bit of peach schnapps. And then topped off with some bubbles is so delicious. And to pull in, what's ripe, where we're sitting right now in the season. And you can have a lot of variety in what you put in here. But the other thing I like are things that you can get 90% of the way finished and then top off when friends come. So being able to grill the peaches, have those chilling and stewing with the liquor, and then just add that little effervescence when your friends come, just has like a little bit of spirit and wow factor to it. So that's what we're sipping on today. And I love anything that can go into a pitcher. Putting those fruit notes and sweetness on the grill is really fun and unexpected. And it's just a fun way to multitask when you have things fired up. So with one of our favorite nights is also anything that's Mexican or Latin inspired. We love taco night. We also love to serve things board style, making things feel elevated but also really approachable. So here I've grilled off some corn on the cob, and then I have some fun little fixings. I have a little fresh chimichurri and a fresh like this really delicious aioli mixture for sort of like that smothered Mexican street corn style. But in prepping for friends, taking a little time to do a really nice rub on meat or marinade is a great way to give you that extra step. And then I've grilled it off, and then I'm keeping it warm here in the warming drawer along with dessert. So let me start with the flank steak. We have beautiful flank steak that I use coriander and cumin and cilantro and garlic. And I'm going to fan that out here on the board, mixed with the corn. And I like things that can be mixed and matched. This is great on a salad. You could do this fajita style. And then just you add those little finishing touches when you're ready to serve. So I'm going to give a little slather of the aioli, and then the chimichurri.
And remind us what's in the chimichurri?
Yeah, it's fresh parsley, cilantro, shallot, a little red wine vinegar, some garlic, and a little bit of olive oil with sea salt. And I just love like picking the herbs, like having those fresh herbs and ingredients where you can like pull right from your cooking space is so much fun. And then pull them in also with the garnish. So you can see I've put it on top, but then I'm going to also add some big fresh cilantro sprigs here. And then I grilled off some lime too. It's just a fun thing when you have like that char mark that like completes the story here. So I have the lime that people can grab for that extra blitz of citrus, and some warm tortillas will go on the side. And edible flowers, because tis the season. We have to pull it all in right here. But the other thing, one of my favorite things also is, I've got super high heat where I seared off the steak, got some great char marks going on the corn, and then I'm left with this super hot oven. So I'll drop the heat down, and over indirect heat, pour some brownie batter into a cast iron skillet. This has a little bit of cinnamon and red chili pepper to give it sort of that Aztecan chocolate nuance, and bake it off just like you would in the oven. With the rounded hood on the Fire Magic, you get this beautiful airflow. It's like baking in a convection oven. And then we also decided to go for a magic view window so you can peer in. You don't have to open up the hood and lose that heat. So it's really fun. I keep this in the warming drawer, top it with vanilla ice cream, and people don't even know where it's come from. It's just like, you can bake brownies on the grill? Yeah, here, have some.
I would love some. So one thing about the citrus, and I think I want to talk about that because I don't think people grill their fruit enough. And what you said about with the limes, that's great because it also gives that a little bit of caramelized sweetness that offsets the sourness. So it's super fun. And then the brownie in the oven is just how long does that usually take? Does it work just like you're baking a brownie in your normal oven, or do you have to be a little bit more careful just as the heat's dropping down to pay attention to what's going on with it?
Yeah, so Fire Magic has a beautiful temperature display, so I keep an eye on it. And I like to let it sit like an oven around 300 to 350. And then about halfway through, I'll give a rotation depending on where it's sitting with my burner units. But they also have heat zone separators. So you get a little bit of control so the flames aren't going to lick the side of your cast iron and scorch the side of it. But when you're working with a heavy metal like cast iron, you have really good heat distribution, and then you benefit from that extra little layer of texture you get on the outside. And I love the things that work best for me are the ones that play well and perform well in my kitchen indoors that I also can carry outdoors, and this is definitely one of them.
Oh, that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're cooking outside and the translation, because you don't want to necessarily get a whole new suite of cooking surfaces or cooking pans and pots and things like that. So and cast iron seems like it does the trick for pretty much anything, and is safe in a grill. So that's awesome. Well, Anna, this was fantastic. And I am going to have to get the recipes from you and make some this weekend for our friends. So many thanks to Anna Rossi for inviting us into her home, and to Fire Magic. And happy outdoor entertaining, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa. Cheers.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Let's get started here. We're here to talk about an office for all the senses. I'm Avi Rajagopal, the editor-in-chief of Metropolis Magazine, and we're presenting today's discussion in partnership with Turf Design. It's a really interesting juncture for us in the workplace. Of course, we're coming off of, the greatest workforce experiment of this century. But, as we do that, I think we've started to pay a lot of attention to the impact that the workplace has in people's lives. Not that we didn't pay attention to that before. I'm not suggesting any designers on this call were cold-hearted and careless people, but certainly there's been a heightened sensitivity to, the connections between productivity, social connections with people, mental health, inclusivity, multi-generational needs, the needs of, neurodiverse people in the workplace. And there's a funny sort of thing that one begins to notice as you read sort of the best practices around each of those things. And they all point to, and they all have this sort of common ground in the sensory needs of people, right? How comfortable we are, how we react to light, sound, temperature, and so on. And of course, we're talking today about the Office for All Senses. So we're also not suggesting that designers don't consider, people's sensory needs, haven't considered people's sensory needs in office design. But I think we're talking today about taking that to the next level. Our culture definitely privileges, sight, touch, to a large degree, a little bit of sound, maybe recently. But, we have a full gamut of senses that we need to address. And in addressing those, we might be able to address some of the larger issues that we're facing in the workplace today. To help us explore this amazing topic, we have a fantastic group of panelists with us today. We have with us Barbara Irvine, who is the author of Creating Sensory Spaces, The Architecture of the Invisible. Barbara is also a consultant, an educator, many hats. Thank you so much, Barbara. We have Carolyn Ames Noble, who is the founder and director of design at Ames Design Collective. Carolyn, such a pleasure to have you on today. We have Mickey Washington, who's the regional leader of workplace at HOK. Mickey, thanks so much for joining us. And also with us is Tammy Glass, who's associate professor and faculty director for the MA in Design program at the University of Texas at Austin. Tammy, thank you so much for taking the time out today. Before we get started, another reminder, I know you heard this just a few seconds ago, but if you have any thoughts, questions, or comments for our panelists today, go ahead and put them in Q&A as you're hearing the conversation. We'll start taking those in just a few minutes. I want to start with Barbara. Barbara, give us an introduction to what you consider sensory spaces. I mean, you literally wrote the book on it. And, whether, can interior designers really address all the senses? And what difference does that make to the people who might use the spaces we design?
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to talk with this panel of people. It's obviously a topic near and dear to my heart. And sensory, well, I think you gave a good introduction, Avi, and sensory design is our spaces that engage all of our senses and really immerse us in an environment of light and heat and texture and aroma and sound. And they provide both physiological and psychological influences on our experience in a space. And if they're designed well, they can help us relax, inspire us, conjure up memories of the past. They help us learn better, work more productively, and heal faster. There's been a lot of research going on in recent decades about all of those. Designed thoughtlessly or without much thought, they can create stress and fear and distraction and low productive spaces to be in. So it's really important for us as designers to take all this into consideration. And these spaces provide, because there are cultural differences and personal differences on what we expect and prefer in spaces, they can give very subtle signals about who belongs in a space and who doesn't belong in a space. And that's significantly important as we approach more diversity in our world and our workspaces. So it's significantly important. And there's been growing interest in the last certainly in the last decade, in the last few decades, about sensory design. Avi, you brought up our ocular centric, or our dependence on vision as our primary sense that we pay attention to. I think our design professions have historically had a lot of attention on vision and what does a space look like. And I think now the other senses are getting their due in what does a space feel like to be in. And so that dominance of vision has made some of our other sensory environments be much more uniform in uniform temperatures, uniform light levels, uniform sound levels. And as we move away from that, the research that's going on about how our sensory systems work, how they interact with each other, is giving us a lot more information about how to design spaces that people feel better in. And then finally, there is the research happening about how people actually are more productive, heal faster, learn better, and we're getting actually quantitative information that demonstrates how important this field is to the field of design. So as we move forward as designers, it's a growing area for us to delve into and to enrich our work with.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for that really amazing overview. And, I just want to pull out that one thread that you spoke about around, how not paying adequate attention to all the senses has led to uniformity, right? And we've all felt that, right? You're in offices where every single space is cool to the exact same temperature, no matter what day of year it is. And some people are in sweaters and some people are sweating, and it's really interesting, right? And when we talk about the different needs of people, I think it becomes even more obvious when, you look at people who might have, additional heightened sensitivity to certain things, people who tend to feel colder. I'm one of those people, or people who have different needs, right? And so not paying attention to sensory design might also end up being a kind of exclusion. And
right.
Barbara, you spoke about how you can immediately sense how you don't belong in a space just through the cues a space gives you. I mean, I don't know if all of you remember the very first time as maybe fresh out of school, you walked into an executive boardroom or something like that, and that feeling you get, that little bit of imposter syndrome, that's a sensory feeling, right? And so thanks so much, Barbara. I think there's a lot of rich layers in what you just told us, but I'm going to pick on that uniformity piece and connect that to some of the work that Mickey's been doing. Mickey, your recent research has been digging into how to support neurodiverse folks in the workplace, but also how, by addressing neurodiversity, how we can create better spaces for everyone, right? And so talk to us about that. Tell us about your research, but also maybe emphasize a little bit the role that sensory stimuli play in designing for everyone in a better way that supports neurodiverse people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Avi, for that discussion and the introduction. And, absolutely everything that Barbara just said is absolutely imperative for designers to understand creating spaces that are inclusive for everybody. There's a wonderful quote that I love that says, "We are freshwater fish in salt water. Put us in fresh water and we function just fine, but put us in salt water and we struggle to survive." And that's what it feels like for people that have sensory sensitivities. Typically, spaces are designed for the neurotypical, right? We're not really thinking about those extreme ends of sensitivities, which neurodiverse individuals have. But a neurotypical person has sensitivities as well. Like you mentioned, Avi, I'm sensitive to sounds. I can hear someone chewing a mile away, and it will distract everything that I do for the rest of the day. Some people may be more sensitive to light levels. So everybody has sensitivities, but really paying attention to those extreme ends as well as the typical sensitivities is really what designing for inclusivity is all about. And mentioning those some of those sensory stimuli, obviously visual is the main one people focus on, and the sounds and the tactile environment, the smell, the olfactory, but also that sense of place. There's a sense of when you arrive in a space, how do you feel in that space? Do you feel grounded? Do you feel lost? Do you feel like this is a safe space for you to be in? And so, paying attention to all of those cues in the design setting is really just part of good design. We talk about what someone with hypersensitivity versus hypo sensitivities look like. Somebody that is hypersensitive gets overstimulated. There's so much extra stimulus that they need spaces that are more calming, that they can just focus and concentrate. And so those environments may look a little different than somebody that is hyposensitive, which they need extra stimulus. They need more bold, let's say bright colors or more patterns and designs to help them be able to find visual cues to help them just really center and focus on something. So, it is really taken into account all of the different senses and really displaying those in a way that doesn't look like that space is just for the neurodiverse. This space is for a neurotypical. It is really a holistic view all together so that everybody feels welcome in every space. But also you can pick and choose which spaces work best for your needs at that time.
I'm sure we're going to dig a little deeper into that, right? There's lots of questions I think that raises in terms of, how does one plan a space, where there's many different types of, where there's people with many different needs in the same space, because obviously we want everyone to feel like a freshwater fish in freshwater, and so how do we create that best fit between the workplace and the occupants? It's just to allow everybody to do their best work, right? So we'll dig into that, and the audience, you can help us dig into that, get your questions into the Q&A tab. Carolyn, I'd like you to talk, we've been talking about productivity, we've been talking about comfort, right? I want to talk a little bit about how we can take that one step further into health and well-being. So how can a multisensory approach help us think about wellness more holistically? And I know you've been doing some work in terms of also making some connections to, certifications or standards that exist. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. And I just wanted to say what an honor it is to be here today with you all, talking about this very important topic as we re-engage in our spaces. Thinking specifically, Avi, a lot of my work has been entrenched with the Well Building Institute, and it's really harmonious to see how sensory design, and I'll take it a step further, it's really sensory integration. It's that ability where when we're experiencing something, we're not just experiencing it through one sense, we're experiencing it through all of our senses. I love to think about nature because nature always gets it right. Any of the experiences we think of, I think right now, because it's summer, I think about the ocean, for example, and how when you experience the ocean, you're seeing it, you're hearing it, you're smelling it, tasting it, feeling it, you feel your body, your presence with the water. And to me, that sensory integration is unyielding. And so over the past, many months, we've all been, in these interesting spaces, whether you're remote, whether you're at home, whether you are back in your office in some capacity. And I think it's really given this ability to think a little bit deeper on how we can bring, almost similar to biophilic design, how can we bring that sensory integration, that experience from the outside in? And what's so just amazing to me is how well particularly really has the supportive data and the research that says that this is possible. We could go through, the senses just to give a few examples. Let's start with sight because it's true. I think, and to not to pick on design and architecture, as we said, but yes, there is a lot of sight stimulus in our spaces. We know this. But then even thinking about that more from a validating standpoint, how can we make that experience better? Again, nature, circadian lighting, bringing that into our spaces, and of course, can support that verification. We're seeing and hearing a lot about sound and sound comfort. It's really amazing to me too, just kind of on the heels of the sustainable movement, LEED accrediting projects about, 2 decades plus ago. Sound and acoustic comfort wasn't necessarily a part of those early iterations, and now they are. We recognize that acoustic comfort can do so much for how we feel, for our productivity, for our stress levels. And again, seeing particularly pull sound out of the comfort section in its first version into its own section on sound wholly in version 2, which I just find to be so nurturing as far as, again, thinking of that sense of sound and our acoustic comfort in our space. And there's one that Mickey had mentioned that I'd really love to pick up on, and it is that sense of self in our space, or proprioception. And I love to think about it. My example is always the parking lot, right? You're trying to find your car. Every floor looks the exact same. You feel this sense of just discomfort. You don't feel as secure. And it's amazing, again, thinking about research and how we can make somebody feel comfortable and secure in our spaces is something as simple as wayfinding. So again, seeing these solutions coming from the sensory integration and the sensory design, really being supported by research and data through accrediting bodies like LEED and WELL. It's really quite a wonderful, harmonious integration at this point.
Exactly. That's a great point, Carolyn. Barbara started us off talking about sort of, the research that exists now, those connections between, sound and sound comfort and acoustic comfort and productivity, for instance, or, all of those connections that exist now. And many of those are actually enshrined in some of the building standards we have today, thankfully, whether you're talking about especially if you're talking about the WELL building standard, and so it's really interesting that is if somebody's looking for research even on the effects of sound, I would point you to the WELL building standard. Their points and requisites are freely available on their website. You don't have to be certifying a project in order to look at what the WELL building standard contains. And it's really interesting because so much of it ties back to sensory, stimuli. Of course, there's sound is its own thing, but then there's a light concept, right, which addresses both sight and, that sense of self, that sense of space, that sense of place, right? So some of these things are actually accessible to us. We have the research in front of us if we want to, educate ourselves a little bit more. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for kind of really laying that out. That was really nice.
You're welcome. Absolutely. And there's one more concept I would add, and that's the mind concept, which really embraces all of this. So.
Right, absolutely. And, as we know, and the mind concept is not just about mental health, but we know that mental health, is a really important factor for us, a new frontier for us to really educate ourselves about, if we haven't already. Tammy, I'd love to bring you in here. But before I do that, one more reminder to everyone. Thanks so much for the folks who've been bringing questions and comments in. The Q&A box is your place to interact with our panelists. So any thoughts, comments, questions, reactions even that you have, please go ahead and put them in. We'd love to take those in and have a lively conversation. Tammy, we've talked about lots of connections that, multisensory design can have with, wellness, well-being, with, supporting, diverse folks in the office. Can you thread those through for us and kind of talk about how taking a multisensory approach or incorporating some of this understanding about the different senses and really understanding how people sense space can help interiors have a broader and much bigger impact? How can we kind of multiply the impact that we have through this approach?
Great. Well, first of all, thanks, Avi, and thank you to my colleagues for really sort of setting the stage for our conversation today. So I'll start by sharing a not so serious anecdote to a pretty rather serious question, Avi, that you've put forward here about the power of design. And so years ago, I was flipping through a pretty well-known interiors magazine, not to be mentioned here, and I landed on a full page spread that I really kind of was confused by and sort of struggled to understand. And it was this really glossy picture, like most architectural photographs of a bedroom, but this wasn't just any bedroom. The designer had really tricked out this particular space. It had faceted and sort of angular forms all over the room. Each surface in the space, from the walls to the ceilings to all of the furniture, had a different pattern, a different texture, or finish of some kind. And then this was sort of brought together by an extremely vibrant color scheme. And so, in looking at it, I kind of felt, wow, this is certainly on trend for kind of the fashion of the spaces of the moment. But I found this sort of undulating forms and this kind of layer upon layer of finish and pattern to create this sort of extreme visual noise. And so I know we talk about sort of prioritizing the visual sense, and this example kind of points to that, but to such an extreme. But the point I want to make about this is that it seemed entirely out of sync with the need for sort of calm and restoration that you would, want an environment like that would be conducive to sleep. So I snapped a picture of it and I sent it to my colleague who's a psychologist and said, this is why designers and psychologists need to collaborate with one another. So admittedly, this is a pretty superficial kind of mismatch that really only affects, one or two people, and those people approved of the design. But begin to think about, for a moment, just imagine how negligent a misalignment could be at the scale, beyond just the scale of a residential bedroom moving toward an entire office building or a city scale, how that kind of amplifies. So, designing for the senses, we've heard a lot of already in our conversation, a lot of wonderful things about it. It also is associated with delight. It has some entertainment value, but there's, as we're hearing, there's so much more to that. So today, my colleague and I are co-editing a book that highlights how spaces can influence us. And as Barbara mentioned, both physiologically and psychologically. And so, as we've heard, as Carolyn mentioned, instead of multisensory design, we can say integrated sensory design. I like that term a lot. And like so many other ways of thinking about and designing a space, this is really powerful. These techniques and approaches can be extremely powerful. And if we look at, say, the instance of neurodiversity in the workplace, taking this sort of approach can really level the playing field by bringing everyone into alignment through a supportive design approach. And this increases equity. It leverages the diverse talent that we need in today's businesses. And that's just looking at it through the neurodiversity lens. You could look at it through multiple lenses. Anytime we can level the playing field, that is critical. And I believe Barbara also mentioned this. If we can do it right, it can be sustainable and it can create healthy spaces that are good for people and good for the planet where we live. So I don't think anyone, would dispute that designers really excel at creating pretty phenomenal spatial experiences. But I really kind of, as we move into our discussion, I really beg designers to consider the impact of their designs and the ethical obligations that really come alongside the power that design has, and to really sort of harness that for good, for something that's bigger than all of us in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tammy. I think when I hear your story about that bedroom, which you said was, not so serious. But actually there's, as you pointed out, a quite serious lesson at the heart of it, right? Sometimes the ill effects of what we might do as designers are not always readily apparent to us, right? And that's something that I think we need to grapple with, right? Is that we may be affecting people, we may be overstimulating people or understimulating people, we may be making people uncomfortable without really realizing it, just because so many people might be using the space that we design. And so, if we think of our impact at an individual level, right? Like just having the sensitivity that we're talking about today, really taking this integrated approach, can mitigate some of that inadvertent harm we might be causing to people. And I think that's an important thing too. While we talk about all the positive effects that we have a few questions in here, but Tammy's response takes me to an idea that I'd love to explore just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll start taking audience questions here. Is, how does a multisensory approach or an integrated sensory approach differ from maybe the mainstream way of practicing design? I'm not going to say today, because of course the ways we practice design today are changing, but how we have historically practiced design. And are there any current practices in design that you'd like to see evolve? Maybe just go to the next level. Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, am I good now? Yeah, okay, great. I guess I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is that it definitely demands an integrated design process, and all of the people at the table, including psychologists and people understanding how the senses work for a diversity of people who are going to use the space. But the other thoughts that I had that came up during some of the other folks' talk this morning or this afternoon was that there are three things that come to play in multisensory design, and that is choice. The first is giving people choices, giving people places where they can go for more light, less light, more warmth, less warmth, just a choice in our environment. Personal control, which is another opportunity for people to adjust the situation so that they're comfortable and that they're not adjusting the entire room, but they're adjusting something around where the space they're occupying. And variability. So choice, control, and variability, and variability so that we've started to understand in many situations that a changing light level, like might happen through daylighting, is actually a much more lively and comfortable place to be in, and that maybe that changing temperatures can also be equally enlivening. So I think those three issues of choice, variability, and personal control are very important in sensory design.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. And I think having all three of those be exemplified through the variety of spaces within a space. Like, you don't have to have a large square footage in order to provide variety and choice of space types. If there's a space that is needed for what we would consider concentrate or focus space. So maybe you have, for someone that is hyposensitive, you have that needs extra stimulus, then maybe there's a layering of textures, maybe not, and you can define what that looks like and what that means for the organization, but there's different layers of textures, different layers of colors, different light levels that may differ from the same type of room function, but for somebody that is hypersensitive and needs a more calming palette, more calming, light levels. So you can still provide the same functions, the same type of functions within a space, but they may be treated a little differently. And so if I'm somebody that I need a little extra stimulus, I'm probably going to gravitate towards the room that may have the bolder colors, or a little more pattern, or is brighter in the light levels in order to be able to focus and concentrate. Whereas if I'm I need to just have serenity and cool, calming blues and greens and ocean views, I might gravitate towards that space that is more enclosed and just quiet and, tucked off to the side.
I might build on what Mickey was just sharing, and to say that at a very fundamental level, it's almost like we have to sort of dial it back to the early programming stages of a project, when a designer is first really conceiving of what a space might be like, what an environment is like, and working together with the client or the organization, whoever it is that they're designing for. We start really simple with, space-based or spatial-based programming. We need a conference room, we need a kitchenette, those sorts of things, to activity-based, like we need a space to collaborate or a space to focus. A third step or a next step or iteration of that could be, really looking at the, sort of sensory programming. What are the different sensory integration sort of lenses that you need to look through, and which spaces do you want to sort of, exemplify or amplify certain aspects, or dial them down or dial them up, and really just sort of thinking about it. I think that's sort of the first step, is just thinking about it very early in the project, and not after, as you're sort of walking the site and hearing, the sound of people on tile floors or whatever it is that is, stimulating our senses.
Yeah, I'd love to pick up on what Tammy was saying. Actually, everyone was saying about, this idea. It really comes down to accommodations, user choice, different spaces, color palette throughout the space that can be, again, as Mickey said, it could be a range of neutrals and colors that can stimulate creativity or stimulate calm. And I feel like I'm looking at this topic and going back to your question, Avi, what is it that could change? What is it that might move forward? I do see some parallels with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. And this idea that those accommodations in a space made it better for everyone. I mean, how many times have you been, for example, you're in a restroom, or maybe you're in the shower in a hospitality space in the grab bar. It's there for a specific reason, but we all use it. And I just feel like when those accommodations become seamless in a space, that's when it really starts to be inclusive for everyone. And that's something that I'm hoping that we see sensory design and design for neurodiverse and inclusive spaces really start to parallel those fundamentals of ADA.
Absolutely. Ramps are a blessing for everyone. I love what we're doing here. I mean, you guys are basically giving us a kind of toolkit for multisensory design. I think, Carolyn, as you're saying, there's regulations out there, there's frameworks out there that point us in the right direction, right? And I think we have to think of it that way, is, how can we make the space better for everyone? We shouldn't think of it as a way of like addressing the needs of specific population or specific needs and things like that. And then Tammy, your point about, thinking about sensory programming. I love that idea, right? When you're thinking about programming of a space, also thinking about that sensory layer, and what are the kind of things you might use to do that. And, as Mickey was saying, kind of creating those, it doesn't matter what the footprint of the space is. What matters is, what can you do with what you have? So really almost like mixing and matching, like overlaying different strategies over different spaces to achieve different kind of effects. And of course, the three golden tools that Barbara has laid out for us, right? Which is choice, variability, and control. Give people choice, give people variability, and give people control. And using a mix of those three, for the different senses across different spaces. It's a really exciting way of thinking about design. Okay, we're gonna get started with some of our audience questions here. Susan Monroe, right at the top. I think Susan, the panelists have all already addressed this. We all agree with you. It says, thinking about temperature, wouldn't be wonderful if there were warmer zones, maybe like a fireplace, and cooler zones in our offices for those of us who are sensitive to temperature. I love that idea. And you don't need a fireplace. All you need is a window that gets some sun to get a slightly warmer spot. So absolutely, I think we're talking about that with variability across all senses. Okay, this question just jumped up to the top, but I'm actually going to take Nancy's questions next. Nancy Zivitz Sussman says, examples, please, especially to calm and entice people back to workspaces and social spaces. So let's talk about multisensory design with office returns. Any examples in terms of how a space can calm people or be more attractive to people or encourage people to be more social? And it doesn't need to be a post-pandemic example, obviously, but I'm sure people can connect the dots.
Sure, I'll start, and I'd love to hear from everybody. But when you're talking about creating spaces for calm, retreat, or refresh, as they go by many names, but you're talking about spaces that do reflect things in nature. Right, you're bringing in some natural materials. You're bringing in natural daylight. Some of those softer colors of blues and greens and woods and plant life. Those are very therapeutic, as I believe we've all been addressing. Very therapeutic and healing spaces, and it makes you want to gravitate towards it when you feel like you either I just need to de-stress for a minute. I need to go someplace calm, or I need to refresh. It can serve multi-purposes, but generally it's bringing nature into the spaces are what we tend to think of when designing spaces for calm or refresh. And then you have those engaging and exciting spaces that will help bring people to want to commune and chat and talk and create, and that are a little more vibrant. Maybe they're more in the open passageways where if you have a stair and people are coming down the stairs, they see people gathering. It's really about not just the palette, which we talk a lot about, and with those textures and materials, but the light, the height of the ceilings. Are you bringing some ceilings that are a little lower to create a more intimate space, or do you have high ceilings with very bright light and they're next to a lot of traffic? And so you can see the buzz as you're coming down the walkways, and like, oh, there's a lot of people congregating and laughing over there. Let me go over there. So those are just some very early examples, just small examples of things that you can do within a space to create those types of engagement and interaction or refresh.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll build a little bit on what Mickey's saying. I think one thing that's really important is considering the contrast between spaces. So, if you're in a very bustling environment, I can think of a couple of examples. One being a sort of busy retail environment, or getting off the plane and navigating through a busy airport, which we might not have done a lot of these days due to COVID. But as as things pick up again, and we find ourselves in those conditions, there's a couple of older examples that have done that quite well in providing a sort of space that isn't completely in contrast to that. So Selfridges did an example where they built a silent room in the middle of one of their retail floors, so that it didn't sell anything, but you could go in there and it was very, very calming, and it had a very completely different sensory experience than being out in the sort of hustle and bustle of the retail floor. And similarly, there's an installation in an airport in Milan that as you move through one of the concourses, it sends you through a space that is completely in contrast to the rest. It's dark, it's cool, it has this sort of mist curtain that you walk through, has daylight coming, sort of a blade of daylight coming from overhead. And your body experiences that contrast and that change and that variability. And it has an actual physical response to it, which then in return sort of helps you de-stress and sort of calm and restore yourself. So for me, I think, thinking about those adjacent conditions and how you might be able to leverage those, especially through creating sort of transitional spaces.
Yeah, and I'd love to posit one more. And, we keep some of the design conversations that some of my colleagues and I have been having, it's not a return to. We're not returning. we will be reemerging, we will be re-envisioning, will we be reimagining what our spaces will be. And in part of that, I think we have all identified that our spaces will be hybrid, most likely indefinitely. So how can we have a sensory experience that connects us when we're all connecting right now through this medium visually, but what are our other senses that we could bring in? And one where we've talked maybe not enough about today is the sense of smell. I saw this really incredible experiential idea recently from WGSN that posits, what if it's the smell, the sense of smell, and this idea of scentscaping that could be another way that we connect? What if through wayfinding, there's different smells in a space? What if there's even a scent that your company or corporation can provide for you when you are at work or perhaps working from home, where you still can feel that connection? So I thought that was a really interesting just idea when we're thinking about hybrid spaces and how we can still feel connected together.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add on to that, because I thought also about, the marketing industry, the product marketing industry, and experience marketing industry is way ahead, I hate to say, of architecture in general, because scent marketing is very, very common. I would say almost every signature hotel has their patented scent, that they may even send out flyers with that scent to kind of remind you to come back and stay there. So I think we have a lot to learn from some of the product work that has happened, and that's already validated the importance of these sensory aspects.
And I think, just one little comment. I think we are starting to see the beginnings of that. I know, especially here in Houston, there's been a few buildings that we'll tour clients through, and you walk in and you can't quite tell what it is, but you know that building has a certain fragrance, if you will, and you remember it when you go into the next space. I'm like, this just smells different. It just feels different, and it works. But I think, it's in the beginning stages, but I am expecting to see more and more in the workplace adopt something like that.
Right. Gail Nappel reminds us that we must be very careful with scent, and there's a respectable part of the global population that's sensitive to scents, just as there's parts of the global population that are sensitive to many sensory stimuli. And of course, scent carries culture and memory and other things with it in a very, very strong way, as we all know. But yeah, that's great. Gail Brigger says, how can designers be more explicit in declaring experiential goals during the programming stage? These goals can then be returned to during the design process and be a lens through which to discuss whether a design is successful or not. So I think, Tammy, maybe picking up on your point about sensory programming, can we talk about how we can be more explicit with stating those goals or setting those goals early in the process?
I mean, I think that one way that I really consider this and think about this is setting engagement goals early on, and sensory stimulation can be one form of an engagement goal. It might be that you want to use intuitive communication, or that you might want to have an environment that is provocative. For certain instances, that's really important for, say, an art installation, where you want to challenge people. Other ways, you might want something very harmonious, like an emergency room. But setting out these sort of early indications of what sort of engagement you want people to have, what sort of interactions you think are important to prioritize. And it might be a combination of things that build off of each other. And my first book was really sort of looking at that, because I felt like that's something that's missing in the design process. We do a lot of things to sort of set our intentions, but sometimes we're not very good at sort of stating what our sort of engagement intentions are. And using the senses or sensory stimulation, I think if you can set that as an early intention in a project, it starts the conversation, and then you can begin to develop strategies around that.
Mhm.
And I'd love to pick up on the Well Building Institute could be very supportive of that as well. I mean, even thinking about something like acoustics, they'll spell out how many walls should have, I think it's a 0.7 NRC rating. So, real-time values that are very based on metrics, very based on research that can really help support that sensory journey programming phase.
Absolutely. I'd love to, pick up, this question. I think that came up quite early in the conversation, and I think a lot of people are probably thinking it, which is, how do we approach considering everyone's different senses? How do we design for everyone? What should we consider? And there's often this anxiety, right, in terms of, well, if I have some people who hate something and some people who love something, I mean, how am I going to design for all of them in the same space? And Mickey, you touched on that a little bit, but can we address that really quick, and then we can move on to our next question?
Sure. It really all boils down to just providing choice. Some people are going to gravitate towards different types of spaces, and your needs actually may change throughout the day. In one of the previous discussions we had with Autism Speaks, when we spoke with one of the women there, she said, depending when she first arrives in a space, she's going to gravitate towards a certain type of look and feel and, patterns or light levels. But throughout the day, that may change, and she may get overwhelmed in the space she was already in before. And so now she's going to look for a different type of space altogether. And I think we all go through that, where we may need to move around as well. So it really does just become an exercise of providing choice. And that way the individual can choose, whether it's every day or throughout the day, what space works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think building on that idea of choice, Mickey, is variation. And so not just variation by the person actually moving from place to place, but variation within the conditions that a person is occupying. There's something I've been reading about recently called alliesthesia, which is basically varying sensory stimulation. And, we experience that outside. And, if we're sitting on a bench and we're in the hot sun and you feel a cool breeze come past, because you've been in the hot sun, you can appreciate that cool breeze. We don't have any of those sorts of experiences typically inside of an environment. It tends to not be very dynamic. The only thing that tends to be dynamic is sort of people moving through the space, not so much the conditions or the environment or atmosphere of the space that we're in. And so really thinking about how lighting and acoustics and, how you might be able to use HVAC and, ventilation systems and things to actually create more variation, I think is another way to be able to do that successfully.
And I'd like to jump in here just to remind, I know that we're all aware of this, but just passive systems provide that variability. So daylighting, operable windows, they both allow the heat, the light, the sound. They allow that variability to happen quite naturally and provide that, Nikki, the connection that you were talking with I think you were bringing up with nature and that biophilic need that we all have. So just our mechanical systems can provide that. We can have a lighting system that dims and brightens, but nature also does it quite a bit on her own, and that there is a liveliness created with that.
That's a great point, Barbara. So no classrooms without windows and those sorts of insane things that we think are of the past, but I sadly think they still are around sometimes.
Yeah, and there's still some sacred cows, right? I mean, I think we've only seriously started to consider outdoor workspaces, I would say, in the last 5 years or so, and even that never quite as seriously as we have, during this pandemic. Alfresco dining has always been a case, but here in New York City, we dined outside, guys, in freezing temperatures, and we're fine with it, right? We did it. So, I think some of our old truisms of, what people might or might not be willing to take or do, we need to re-examine them, right? And then we might be actually able to create real choice, real variability, and real control for people, and then end up benefiting, people we didn't expect to benefit. Mo Martinson asks, and this probably will be our last question for today, but it's a good question to end on. How do we test and verify multisensory design during the process and its outcome afterwards? While you guys ponder on that, I just want to tell everyone in the audience, first of all, there's not a lot of questions, but there's some amazing discussions going on in the Q&A. A lot of input, lots of resources. If you haven't stepped into the Q&A tab, you should. There's a lot of cool stuff in there, lots of nice references, resources, links, good discussion. So please jump in there, look at the conversation. There's some things to be learned there as well. But okay, to the panel, Mo's question: how do we test and verify throughout the process, and then also test the outcome when we're taking a integrated sensory or multisensory approach?
So while, again, I think there's some great standards in place, I still think that there is some intuition and some intuitive and we talked at the very beginning about the programming phase and asking questions. The same is true of this. We'll be finding very different answers. And I do think that there is a very human quality in this that may be more qualifiable than necessarily quantifiable, along with some of those other really great metrics, again, that we can find from some of the other supporting accrediting bodies.
And I will say, I know it's in the works. I'm not quite sure where it is in the process, but those governing bodies starting to regulate, just like with ADA, if you provide spaces for ambulatory people, then you need to provide an equal space in the same area for someone that is non-ambulatory. So in the same manner, we are starting to hear those discussions from regulatory bodies that if you're going to provide spaces for neurotypical, you need to provide the equal type of spaces in the same areas, or, not that you're going to go to that side of the building for neurodiverse spaces. So I think those will also start to come into play as you're designing and you're programming these spaces. Are you providing those same equal levels for all?
And I'll jump in with the plug for post-occupancy evaluations. I think that, they're expensive. They're an extra step in the design, but it's really where the rubber meets the road of where we understand what works for people and what doesn't. And they should not be shaming of designs that partially work, because they're just information that we're all gaining of what works and what doesn't. And that's critical information for us to understand moving forward. So what's the next design going to be? Because this is how this one worked and didn't work.
Yeah, great. Definitely need post-occupancy evaluations and sort of surveys to hear from people. You can also, there's a lot of great sense technology that is coming pretty readily available. You can also begin to measure biofeedback to really see how people are responding within spaces. And, if you might not necessarily be able to do that on the front end of a new project, but you can certainly look to sort of prototypes and smaller scale examples that researchers have been working on and collaborating with multiple disciplines to develop, so that for this purpose, to really sort of test and experiment and explore, so that we can then take what we learn from that and do that on a larger scale and in multiple building typologies going forward. So I think there's a lot of quantitative and qualitative ways that we can begin to measure and sort of begin to work toward a more integrated sensory approach.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. I mean, there's just, I'm going to try and string all of this together. First of all, there are benchmarks available, not for everything, but for some things within some of our existing, building certifications or standards or other places. including the ADA, and sort of other codes and regulations, where if you look with the right eye, you might find surprisingly a lot of multisensory design guidelines embedded within there. Yes, but also I think as Carolyn said, you have to use those guidelines, understanding the human factor, just as we do with everything else. I mean, you go into an office and only 60% of people say that they want, an XYZ kind of space, or they want a large desk versus a small desk. And designers make those kinds of decisions all the time. I mean, that's what we get paid the big bucks to do, is to kind of, rationalize that stuff. And so we have to use that qualification along with the quantification, as you said, Carolyn, to really get the right approach here. But regulation is coming. Nikki pointed that out. There's increasing guidance on, especially dealing with neurodiverse folks, and really mandating that we treat everyone, sensitively and equally in space. And so building the tools, getting used to this language, educating yourself might be a good idea, as we prepare for some of those things to hit. And when they do, ultimately there will be a conversation as well. And Barbara, thank you so much for really speaking up for post-occupancy evaluations. It has been a long, I think, battle, but I think on many other fronts, we're finding post-occupancy evaluations are so useful, whether it's on, in terms of sustainability, in terms of, hitting those wellness criteria. So again, it's not like we have to create a special mechanism to verify our outcomes. I think, we can use existing mechanisms. It's just that we have to ask the right questions and read into them, right? And Tammy, to your point, yes, of course, we have to constantly learn from past experiences. And that means, looking at past projects, our own projects, but also looking at the research and data that's available out there, and using prototypes or using models, simulations, things like that, is rich new ground for designers to engage with. There's so many scientific researchers doing work like that. We see Gail Brager from the Center for the Built Environment, in there from Berkeley. Gail's very, helpfully provided their website address as well for anybody who wants. This has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you all so much for weighing in, for really pointing a way forward for everyone who might be interested in improving the sensory experience of the spaces they're in. Sound, light, acoustics, thermal comfort, smell, texture, all of these things are so important. And if we're not using every tool in our toolkit, we're not fully realizing our potential as designers. And so there's still so much for us to do. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time. Thank you to all our audience members for that exciting discussion. We took up as many questions of yours as we can, but the conversation and the Q&A is just fabulous. Love all the resources, love all the sharing, love all the cooperation. This is what we need. Thank you all so much. And have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks especially, of course, to Turf Design for making today's discussion possible. The folks at Turf have some great acoustic solutions for you to check out as well. Thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.